Caitlin E, and welcome to the Lit Review. Today we're going to do my April reading wrap-up. I have 11 books to get through today, so it was another really good reading month. I matched my reading month in March, which is, the high that I've had for this year, so 2 months in a row where I've read 11 books. Kind of impressive, not gonna lie to you. Let's go through the stats really quick, and then we'll get into my reviews for each of the books that I read. So, I read 11 books. That means I read 3,426 pages. I didn't listen to any audiobooks this month, so I don't have any hours listened, and my average rating, as you'll find out, is kind of on the low side. It's a 3.2 average rating for April, so we got some stuff to talk about. In terms of formatting, I listened to 0 audiobooks, read 3 ebooks, and the remaining 8 were all physical off of my own TBR, so I'm really making progress on my own TBR. So again, owned was 8, and then I borrowed 3, and the 3 books that I borrowed actually came from my sample or my free 2 months of Kindle Unlimited. In terms of my audience this month for April, I read 10 adult books and only 1 that could be classified as YA. Normally my audience is a little bit more varied than that. I think I could probably break down some of those adult into new adult titles, but mostly adult. And then for genres, the 3 genres that I read most in April were fantasy, smut, and graphic novels. So there's that as a breakdown. And then I will add my fancy graphic on the screen here so you can get a peep at it. But in terms of my ratings breakdown, we don't have any DNFs, no 1 stars, no 1.5 stars. But we do have 2 2-star reads, 1 2.5 star read, 3 3 stars, so it's kind of where my middle's hanging out, 2 3.5, 2 4, no 4.5s, and 1 5-star read. If you've been paying attention to my vlogs, I bet you already know what that 5-star is, and you may even know what some of my 2 stars are. But let's crack into this. Let's talk through all of my reading habits for the month of April. So this month I participated in 1 major readathon, and that was the Owl's Magical Readathon. And I think there were 4 books for that? Yeah, I think 4 books because I've successfully completed my owls. So I'm on my way to being a mage of visual arts. But the first thing that I read in April that was not part of my owls was Emily McGovern's Bloodlust Bonnets. This is a graphic novel, and the artist and author is like one of my favorite webcomic. Actually, no, I think she works with an artist for color, but she does all of the line drawings. So she is one of my favorite webcomic authors. She does My Life as a Background Slytherin, and I was hoping that this would give me all of the same feels and humor, and for the most part it did. I gave this 3 stars. I think the humor is really great overall, but I do think this is one of those things that I don't recommend you read this all in one sitting, because otherwise I think the story gets a little repetitive. I also think the humor doesn't always land as cleanly if you read it all the way through. Like, I enjoyed this as a reader so much more when I broke it up over a couple of days. There is some LGBTQIA plus rep in here, and that's really cool, and its own voices, because I believe Emily McGovern identifies as bi. So that's always nice to see. I love it when I can make that happen. But it's just like really quirky, fun. You could definitely consider this kind of like romantic poets and their misadventures. So this was quirky and fun. I would recommend it if you are a fan of Emily McGovern's, or if you are a huge like Regency or romantic poet buff, because like the digs at Oscar Wilde and George Burns and people like that were like really funny. So as a former English major, like this kind of made me laugh a little bit, but I did not love it as much as I was prepared to. So 3 stars. Oh, and just to remind you, I do have a system with my reading wrap-ups where I have 2 cardboard boxes just out of sight over here. I have my nope box, I have my no, so anything that I know I don't want to keep, and then I have my maybe box, the one that's like, I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this, let me think on it, and then when these boxes fill up, I will do a video around them and let you know like what I'm keeping and what I'm definitely unhauling. So even though this is a 3-star, which would normally put it in the maybe box, I just have such a special place in my heart for Emily McGovern, and I know I'm going to keep this. The next book is the one, the only, the booktube sensation, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, aka Crescent City. This is so confusing, I really have to say this. Like, the fact that she's given it 2 titles with larger prominence is mind-boggling. I'm sure that it's a series title, but like, just pick one, because we're all gonna just call it one of these. Just like, please, as an author, please figure that out. Frickin' loved this. If you saw my blogs, you know that I cried, I laughed, I really enjoyed the level of smut in here. I know I've seen some mixed reviews where some people are just like, it's not for me. 100% is for me. I loved it. If you watched my first blog that I did in April, I even did like some fan art on camera for one of my favorite supporting characters, Lily, and this book is a 5-star because I just loved the last 200 pages in particular really sold it for me. You're going to hear from anybody who reads this book that the first 100 pages are slow AF. Like, it is a very slow read initially, but holy moly, it is so good when it gets going. I compared it to a roller coaster where it's like that slow, steep climb. And then once you get to that peak, though, you are like ready for that drop because it's going to be a ride from there on out. And that's what I would compare this reading experience to. It was so much fun. I really love Bryce. I like that she's, a little problematic in some ways, like that she's dealt with drug abuse and like been a bit of a party girl, but is also like really capable. And one of the things that Maas gets criticized sometimes for is that like all of her characters are just unbearably hot. And like, yeah, that's happening here. But I don't mind it. I really, again, some of my favorite authors are like Laurel K. Hamilton and, Sherilyn Kenyon and like that fantasy romance space. So like, I see Maas as really closely aligned to that fantasy romance space, and I freaking love it. So this was just a 5-star. It gave me the biggest book hangover I've ever experienced in my life. Like, the rest of this month is going to be a tough act to follow, and you're going to see that in my ratings for sure. Like, I was book drunk after this and then immediately had a hangover, and I'm going to reread this at some point in 2020. I can just feel it because it's so good. Obviously, I'm keeping that. Then we have what is perhaps my biggest disappointment of the month, which is Shay Earnshaw's Winterwood. This was an Owl Crate exclusive, very beautiful. Love the aesthetics of this actual book. Did not enjoy this. And it really disappoints me that I did not enjoy this because I hear really good things about Shay Earnshaw's writing. I love some prose in its favor. Very atmospheric. Love the creepy forest. The Wicker Woods. Nora Walker is our main character, and she comes from a long line of ladies who are witches. A long line of ladies who are witches. And they are some of the only people that can traverse this very spooky, creepy Wicker Woods without being harmed, because everybody in the area knows that these woods are just off limits. And so Nora, in the opening chapters, finds a young man in the woods. And that's one of her small gifts, is that she can really find lost things. So it turns out this boy that she finds, Oliver, has been recently missing from the boys' camp across the lake. And so Nora has to figure out if she can trust Oliver and, figure out what it means that he's in her woods. I was really hoping that the atmospheric creepiness of this would continue and basically help me shake off the doldrums after House of Earth and Blood. I felt the big problems for me in this novel, without giving any spoilers to you. I felt like the 2 major twists I knew within 50 pages. And that was really frustrating. If I can do it, then it's not very well constructed, in my opinion. So this was very frustrating because once I figured out what the 2 twists were, it was like having the characters stumble around and be like, I don't understand. It's like, it's right in front of you. If I can figure it out, you should figure it out. Get it together. So that was really frustrating. It led to me giving this a 2-star rating. So this is going to go in my no box. I wish it was different. I am still interested in reading more of Earnshaw's writing because I think she builds worlds really in an interesting way. So I would consider reading The Wicked Deep. I don't currently own that, but this is a no for me. I should mention that House of Earth and Blood was a successful owl for me. That was my owl for astronomy, which was read a book mostly at night. And then Winterwood was my cover for Charms. So that was Lumos Maxima, read a book with white on the cover. So those were my 2 owls there. I'll tell you when my other owls come up. But I was really just trying to shake off the gnarly feelings of reading Winterwood. So I picked up a graphic novel that I've been wanting to read for a really long time. It's a kind of like bind up of 2 single issue comics. So I really shouldn't call it a graphic novel. It's a bind up of 2 single comics. But that is Gotham by Gaslight by Brian Augustyn and Mike Mignola. Part of the draw for me was absolutely Mike Mignola. Mike Mignola is most famously known, at least in my mind, as being one of the big artists for Hellboy. So this is, like I said, a 2-issue bind up of kind of Victorian era Batman. The first issue is kind of posing the question of like, what would happen if Jack the Ripper came to Gotham and met Batman? And then the second one is still in that same world, is basically Batman fighting a steampunk villain. So it's very fun art style, kind of gritty and dark, very different from your typical Batman, but also the first issue in here, the one with Jack the Ripper, does feature his origin story, so like that will be very familiar to readers. So this was just like fun. I gave it 3 stars. I will be keeping this one because I think it's just such like a unique thing within my comic collection. So even though 3s tend to, again, end up in the maybe box, I think this is a keeper for me. Then I have my erotic BDSM romance that I got from my Ripped Bodice unboxing way back at the beginning of March, but this is Dr. Bad Boy by Ainsley Booth and Sadie Haller. I really enjoyed this. I gave this a 3.5 star rating. So this is just really well written, multi-perspective romance. Max and Violet. Max is a former child star turned pediatrician who is into kink. He's into BDSM, and he meets Violet quite by accident in the beginning of the novel. And then, cut to like almost a year later, he finds out that Violet, when he moves to a new town, is his new lawyer for for the managing of his businesses. So they have like a bunch of sexual chemistry early on, and they have to kind of like fight it to work together, but then they end up making it work and falling for each other, because I feel like I can say that I can give that as a semi spoiler. It's a romance novel. There's an HEA. I'm sorry, but I really enjoyed this. I'm giving it a 3.5 star because there was like 1 or 2 scenes that weren't quite my kink, like weren't my kind of deal. But I do think this is a really lovely depiction of what a healthy BDSM relationship looks like. Because I think sometimes romances write them in like really stereotypical fashion, but this one talks about things like aftercare and like committing to your partner and like the ways in which dominant and submissive relationships actually function. And so this, I just really loved it for that. And some of the sex scenes in here were really good smut. So I think you know what, it's a 3.5. I'm actually gonna put this in the maybe box because I would highly recommend this to somebody who is looking for a BDSM romance. I am not sure I'm going to reread it. The next book I read was an owl for me. It was Divination. So this is the one that I had to enter like my own TBR into a random number generator, and I picked out The Iron Codex by David Mack. So I'm really glad this came up on my TBR. This was a 4-star read for me, and man, I totally forgot how much I loved this dark arts series. The 3rd one I think is coming out in like June or July. And I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully Litland will be kind to me and I can order the 3rd book, because I really want to know what happens with these characters. So this is the 2nd book in a dark arts series. The 1st book, Midnight Front, takes place during World War II. This book takes place somewhere like in the midst of the aftermath of World War II, like what we would in America consider to be part of the Cold War. And so basically, if you like history, but you also like fantasy and magic, I would highly recommend this series. I will give some trigger warnings for like drug and alcohol abuse, because the magic system in this world is based on like yoking demons. So in order to do any kind of magic or sorcery, you have to yoke demons to you and bend them to your will, and that means that the demons kind of like live in your body and try to get you to be a terrible human being. So what the people end up doing is like drinking or taking drugs to like dull the noise, and it can be a really toxic thing if that's not your scene. It is really a dark magic fantasy series. I still would highly recommend it if you're open to it, because I really enjoyed Midnight Front, really enjoyed the Iron Codex. It is so fast paced. It is like watching 24, the show 24. Like, it is very action oriented, and the magic is really great. David Mack writes great action scenes. What keeps them from being a 5-star for me? I think about the series a lot, but it's not like one of my best of all time. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is I enjoy the heck out of it. I really like the series, but I'm not going to recommend it to everybody. I don't think that like I love it so much that it transcends my internal logic of like who would like this. You know, like, I don't care if you don't like Sarah J. Maas. I'm probably still going to recommend House of Earth and Blood to you because it's one of apparently my favorite books of all time. You know what I mean? Like, that's what a 5-star is to me, where you're like, I mentally understand that this might not be for you, but I can't help it. I gotta love it. This is like, oh, I could see why this maybe wouldn't be for people. I really enjoyed it though, so 4 stars, you know? Like, so that's what this means for me. I'm gonna keep it. I can't freaking wait to read the rest of the series. So that was my divination exam, the Iron Codex, and then I really struggle with getting my last owl out of the way, and I will go through that one with you. If you watch my vlogs, you know that I went through a time, and then I got really stubborn where I was like, no, I'm gonna finish this book. Dang it, I'm going to. And that is The Ultimate Harry Potter and Philosophy. It is a collected essay volume edited by Gregory Bassam. So these are all like academic style essays of like 15 to 20 pages, which I'm super familiar with this as a format because as somebody who's in academia, like, this is what we're expected to produce. We're expected to produce a lot of little essays and eventually a book. But, you know, so this is kind of a pop psychology or pop philosophy, better worded, volume of all of these essays about Harry Potter. And it is written after the series was completed, and all of the films were completed too. So it references both the films and the books. And it's broken into 5 sections about different issues within life and Harry Potter. And some sections were just better written than others. Like, there were a couple of essays in here that drove me up the wall. Like, I was mad at them. If you watch, again, I'm sorry I keep saying this, but if you watch my vlog, you know there was one essay in particular in here that almost made me rage quit this book because, unbeknownst to the author, they posed like a question about like, what if you could go outside for the first time in months? And, you know, like, basically described our quarantine situation, and I was just like, rude. There were some good essays in here that were really thought-provoking. There was one in particular about like house pride and patriotism, and like what are the values of that and what are the potential dangers of that, which made me think a lot about how we all engage with Harry Potter and our house pride. You know, I say that as a proud Ravenclaw, but it made me think. So there were some good things in here, but by and large, I thought the majority of essays in here were just middle of the road and kind of meh. So that is why it's getting a 2-star from me. I didn't hate it. Like, the couple of essays in here that were good redeemed it a smidgen. But I will not be keeping this. It is, however, a book that I have knocked off of my these books will self-destruct in 12 months. So there is that, but, you know, it's not sticking around. So, Okay, so that's my owls completed, because the Harry Potter essay book was my history of magic, so read a book about witches and wizards, so obviously that would count. And then the next thing I read was actually my April book of the month. It is so rare that I read my book of the month in the month that it actually comes. But I couldn't resist this one. It's actually an early release from Book of the Month, and it will be coming out this May. So, Beach Read by Emily Henry. So that's part of why I wanted to get on it so I could talk to you about this. I gave this 3.5 stars, and we can talk a little bit more about why, but let me get through the synopsis first. So this book is about January, who is a romance novelist, and Augustus, aka Gus. January is a struggling romance novelist, and she's not normally struggling. She's got a good career, but her dad recently passed away, and in his dying, he reveals kind of this big secret, and she has to come to terms with it. It really fractures her belief in life and love and the life she's lived. So she escapes to this beach house to try to finish writing her novel, even though she's not feeling inspired. And across the way is Gus, who turns out is also a struggling writer who is, not feeling inspired to finish this book that he's been working on for years. So they decide one night to swap genres. In the midst of this rivalry, you get to get a sense of their delicious sexual tension. And you're mostly in January's head. You don't really get it's a January perspective novel. It's a one-person perspective. You don't get any of Augustus's perspective, and I really wish you did. So here's the thing, and this is going to be super personal, because I've heard a lot of people really rave about this novel, and I think that raving is justified. I'm not here to naysay it. What I am here to tell you is why this didn't fully work for me. So I talk a lot about mental health on this channel, right? Like I talk a lot about like what works for me, what doesn't work for me, whether that's, mental health related, whether that's kink and sexuality, like that's all part of what I'm here to talk to you about. This gets a 3.5 from me because you are so stuck in January's head. And there are parts of that I really resonated with. Like she loses her father. I have lost my father at a younger age than January did. So I resonated really strongly with her grief and her questioning and her anger in her grief. And I thought that was really well done. She's also a very insecure or anxious person, which I think has value in books. I don't want to claim that we can't have anxious characters be relatable or valuable, because I think that's BS, I think we need those characters too. What bothered me is that her insecurities felt probably accurate for when you're in your own head and you're feeling insecure, but she would just deeply misread situations with Gus where like me as a reader is like screaming at her, being like, no, that's not an accurate reading of this scenario. Like, what are you doing? And so that's probably deeply accurate for those of us who struggle with our anxieties and our insecurities, but like it really pulled me out of my read, because it's supposed to be a rom-com, and like that doesn't mean that you can't have depth and emotional depth. I think that Emily Henry does a really good job at providing a lot of complexity to her characters. These are like very real people, I think. But perhaps because January's insecurities maybe pushed a couple buttons for my own insecurities and like how unrealistic it is, like when you see it as a reader, how unrealistic somebody else's insecurities are. You have to kind of maybe question your own a little bit too. So I did not enjoy that aspect of it. For some people, I know that is gonna like really resonate with them and it's gonna feel really real and really beautiful. So for you, I highly recommend this book. I do still recommend it at a 3.5. A 3.5 is a great rating. It means I liked it. I want to tell people about it. But, I would also caveat that telling you about it with these things that I've just mentioned. So this is a 3.5. Even though I've let some lower rated things escape the maybe box, I think this is going in the maybe box for me. Because I don't know if I want to reread this. So this is a maybe, and I may even pass this on to a friend. We'll see. The last 3 books that I read in April, I do not have physically because they were all of my ebooks. So basically, the last weekend in April was, I think, Smutathon. And I didn't do a structured video for Smutathon, but I did kind of unofficially participate. So I used my Kindle Unlimited subscription. So I read The Loner's Lady by Jessa Kane. Our MC is going up to the mountains with her best friend to pretend to be his girlfriend because he doesn't want to come out to his dad. So, but the problem is that once they get up to the mountains, she finds herself insta-lust and insta-love attracted to her best friend's dad, and the feeling is mutual. So that's all I'm gonna give you for summary. It gets smutty fast. And it's, it's very alpha male, like very possessive, but in a way that's like mutually possessive. Like she's not put off by it, and I guess because she wasn't weirded out by it, I wasn't weirded out by it. Like it's very unrealistic. It is a fantasy, but it was fun. I had a good time with it, so I gave it 4 stars. It's like a I've mentioned before, but like my best friend's blank is kind of a trope that works for me. And I don't mind an age gap romance as long as it's, you know, safe, sane, and consensual. So like that's kind of my general rule of thumb there, but I liked The Loner's Lady. The next one I read was Penelope Douglas's Credence. And so this is not my first Penelope Douglas. I read Birthday Girl from her, and I enjoyed Birthday Girl. I think I gave it like 3 stars. That was the one I would actually reread again the next time I have it on KU. Credence is not my favorite. I gave it 2.5 stars, and I'm going to tell you why, because I feel like Credence is getting a fair amount of read and hype in the niche of booktube that reads this kind of novel. Tiernan is the MC, and she, at the beginning of the book, loses her parents and ends up moving to Colorado, up in the mountains of Colorado, with her dad's stepbrother and his 2 sons. So just to be super duper clear, there is no blood relationship between these individuals. There is only like the thinnest of familial ties, because where this goes next might freak some of you out, and that's totally okay if it does. I'm not judging you. You are free to judge me. So when winter comes and they're snowed in on the peak, she starts to get intimate with all 3 of them. And each of these individuals, these male individuals, have super intensely different personalities. And here's the thing. I'm giving this a 2.5 stars because I'm mad about who she ends up with. I will not spoil anything for you. I don't like who she ends up with, and why I don't like him is that he reminds me, and some of his behavior reminds me of some of my abusive exes from my past. And so whenever I read behavior that sometimes gets written as like, ooh, alpha male, like no, it's triggering for abuse, and I'm not here for it. So some of the smutty scenes were really good. Penelope Douglas writes angst and complicated feelings really, really well. She writes good smut, and she writes good long form smut. Like that is so freaking rare in this genre. Like she writes big chunky books, you know, like it's normally good stuff. I'm just so pissed at who Tiernan ended up with. I don't like how that went down at all. So that's why it's getting 2.5 stars for me. I honestly would have been so much happier if this had been like a weird reverse harem situation, but no. The minute she decides which one of them she wants, she like laser focuses in on that individual, and it was just like, I don't respect your choices. I'm sorry. I know that's maybe not like the most thoughtful thing or caring thing to say, but like that's where I'm at with it. So Credence, 2.5 for me. Not gonna reread that one. And then the last little bit of smut that I read for April, and the last book I read for April, was Pinch of Sugar by Jessa Kane. It is a daddy kink book, so like go into it knowing that it was just kind of middle of the road for me. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, so that's why it gets 3 stars. Well, that's 6. 3 stars. So daddy kink doesn't offend me, and I think that's really what it comes down to with a lot of smut for me, is it's like I'm gonna be pretty generous with my rating as long as it doesn't hurt me in some way. Or like offend is maybe the wrong word, but it just like with Credence I felt like triggered based on past emotional and physical abuse, so like I wasn't here for that portion of the book. But like Pinch of Sugar I got no problems with. So if you're into like a little bit of daddy kink play in a baking scenario, like give it a go. It was cute. She gets like, the main character gets roped into almost like a nailed it situation where you are a bad baker and you are not good at your job. And this judge kind of just has compassion for her, really falls for her, and it's insta love, it's insta lust. But it was cute. You know, if you're into that kind of stuff, I say go for it. It was like a 68-page like KU book. Not too shabby, not a bad way to wrap up your month. So that's it for me. That's April, done and dusted. I had a really fun reading month, despite the fact that my average rating is kind of low. I feel like I had some really good reading experiences that taught me more about myself as a reader, so I can't really complain. I'm super pumped for how May's going to turn out, but I'll be checking in with you at the end of next month to see how that goes in the reading wrap up. Thank you for spending time with me. I hope you have a fantastic reading day. Like and subscribe if you want to see more from me in this channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!